Good afternoon. I'm with AARP. I'm the Associate State Director for AARP here in Michigan. Earlier yesterday, you heard from Eric Schneiderwin. He is our former volunteer state president and our former national state president. So I want to talk about a little bit about AARP's Livable Communities work, the history of it. We've been involved doing Livable Communities work almost from our inception, probably from our inception. If you remember from Eric's presentation, AARP, Dr. Ethel Percy Andrus, who was an educator, found a former educator, a Spanish teacher, living in a chicken coop because she couldn't afford her housing and her prescription drugs. And this caused her to take action. She formed a kitchen cabinet, and they decided that they were going to take action and do things. And eventually, AARP came to be. And so the housing piece was, well, what am I pushing here? There we go. So one of the first things, livable community-wise, and Dr. Andrus really focused on community from the very beginning, and older adults in the community, and older adults' ability to navigate the community and stay connected to the community. And so one of the things that she did early on, in 1960, the picture on your left is Dr. Andrus, who's the woman there, presenting a model of what she called Freedom House to President Eisenhower. The picture on the right is the actual Freedom House that she had built just outside the area where the White House Conference on Aging was held in 1961 in Washington, D.C. This Freedom House was the result of a lot of research that was done to determine what were the needs of older adults to be able to stay in their homes as they aged, what we call aging in place, or and this Freedom House had things like 3-foot wide doorways and hallways. It had an accessible, a no-step entrance, a zero-step entrance. It had an accessible bathroom. So things that were then people didn't talk about, but later became known as universal design. So she was definitely a woman ahead of her time. We're still talking about the need for universal design in homes for people to be able to stay. So why is AARP still talking about livable communities? Why is it so important? Well, AARP, the boomers have changed our country from the beginning, and they continue to change our country. There's a profound and permanent change happening in the demographics of our country. Have you talked about that? Today or yesterday? Okay. So as you know, there's a profound and permanent change happening. 10,000 boomers are turning 65 every day. And by 2030, 1 in every 4 adults is going to be over the age of 65. So what does this mean for our communities? For transportation, it's going to mean things like 1 in every 4 drivers is going to be over the age of 65. Individuals who have limited mobility, such as neuropathy in the feet or things like that, are going to need sidewalks that are even and they don't trip over, all kinds of things like that. So I had to actually look up what active transportation meant when they made this request. I thought, okay, it's non-motorized transportation, but it also includes, according to the Department of Transportation, buses and things like that. So obviously, of the active transportation, the biking and walking is what we talk about most, I think. So I love the last presentation where they're talking about, the streets and complete streets. A lot of what they were talking about, complete streets, although you're missing like the benches and some of the streetscape and things like that. But the road diets and all that, hugely, hugely important. So this demographic change, this is a 2015 picture, and it shows how the boomers, which are 74 million strong, are followed up by the millennials, which is an even larger group. And as you see below that, those numbers are continuing to grow. The slide I didn't put in here is what's happening to the 80 plus. And the 80 plus, by 2030, we're going to have twice as many people over the age of 84 as we had just in 2012. We're going to have almost 10 times as many people over the age of 100 as we had in 2012. This, for transportation, is going to be huge because people, later there's a slide that you may already know, people outlive their ability to drive by 7 to 10 years. Those 7 to 10 years are not years that people are so ill that they have to stay home and are invalids. They can still be vital, contributing members of society if they can get where they need to go. I know we're running a little bit behind, so I'm going to kind of move through some of this quickly, this next part. One of the reasons transportation is so important and livable communities is so important is that it's vitally important to communities to keep older adults in the community and to keep everybody, to be attractive to all areas. You want to have the young families and the workforce that's needed, the talent for the workforce that's needed to keep communities vibrant, but you also want to keep your older adults in the community. So you really need you really need transportation to fill that entire span. The good thing is that the millennials and the boomers really want the same thing for the most part in terms of transportation and housing and other things. So the longevity economy is a report that was done that talks about the 50 plus in this country and talks about the transformative force that they are economically in this country. The fact that they in 2012, this report came out in 2012, they had $7.1 trillion in economic activity, projected to reach $13.5 trillion of annual economic activity by 2032. Meaning that they are the third largest economy in the world, just the 50 plus in the United States. Just behind, not too far behind China. So AARP, in response to the need for livable communities, became an affiliate with a World Health Organization program called the Age-Friendly Cities program. We renamed it a little bit with their blessing, calling it the AARP Network of Age-Friendly Communities, because our motto is what we do for all. We do for all ages and abilities. And the World Health Organization program is specifically for urban centers, whereas we work with urban centers, rural, the whole 9 yards. It is, I don't believe Eric talked about this. Did Eric talk about this? Okay. So the AARP Network of Age-Friendly Communities is based on 8 domains. The built environment, which includes housing, transportation, and then outdoor buildings, like public buildings like this one, and trails and other outdoor spaces, parks and things like that. And the social environment, which is social participation, respect and inclusion, work and volunteerism, communication, and health and supportive services. So the built environment, which transportation, I think, is the most important piece, and I'll explain why in a minute. The built environment has to be there for individuals to participate in the social environment. So if Eric, our former state director, wanted to come present at the conference, he has to have housing where he can get in and out of the house and navigate the house. He has to have transportation to get here, and he has to be able to get in and move around and have an accessible building. Otherwise he couldn't come here and do a presentation. So housing, the obstacles in housing, I don't think are as big as the obstacles in transportation. Because for transportation, you have to have a wide tapestry of options to complete the needs of the entire lifespan of the demographics. So we have the largest increase in the demographics, 65 plus happening. We have the greatest wealth in the country, people who want to remain in their homes and their communities, and are willing to spend their money locally if they can get there. So the biggest hurdle is getting there. So I use my father as a perfect example. He was getting older, he had some health issues, he used oxygen, he had emphysema and a number of other issues. We moved him into a completely accessible condo that was a block and a half from his law office. And the idea was that he could walk to his law office. He'd walk one block, cross the street, get to his law office. Worked great for the first 3 years he was there until he had to start using oxygen and carrying oxygen behind him. His ability to walk quickly enough to cross the street to get to his law office became problematic. Even calls to the city to talk about the timing of the light didn't make any difference, even though I know them. And he basically he was no longer able to drive, and he no longer could work. Working was his life. Working was his passion. He no longer could drive. He no longer could cross a street to get to the bus stop. So he was really, he told me, a prisoner in his own home. So transportation, huge. I mean, I know you had a session about transportation and health and people being able to avoid isolation and avoid depression and get where they need to go and get to the doctor and all that. It's hugely important, as you all know. As I said earlier, people outlive their ability to drive by 7 to 10 years. Driving really, what do people think of? What does driving mean to people? We have asked this question many a times. We have a program called We Need to Talk, which is about how to have that conversation to take away the keys or someone to give up their keys and move into driving retirement. And I always give that group an example of what happened in my household. I had a husband who, when he and his brother and sister turned 16, that day they went out and got their driver's license. So when my kids turned 16, that very day they went out and got their driver's license. So I had, like on a Tuesday, I had our 16-year-old son came home, new driver's license, hot in his wallet, said, "Can I go over to Jason's?" And I said, "Sure. Can I take the car and go to Jason's?" I said, "Sure, be home by 6:30 for dinner." He comes home, he walks in the door, he raises his arms, he goes, "Independence feels so good." The next day I take my father to the doctor's, and the doctor says, "Mr. Walsh, you have no business being behind the wheel of an automobile." The devastation that he felt was immeasurable. We went out to lunch afterwards, and he was inconsolable. He didn't know what he was going to be able to do. This is the point where we moved him into his accessible condo with the idea that he could get to work that way. There needs to be available optional transportation. I know a lot of you talk about paratransit. Paratransit is wonderful. The problem with paratransit was expensive. The need with the demographic change happening, there's just not the ability to handle the numbers, I think, is not there today, is kind of what I'm hearing from our conversation earlier, and is certainly not going to be there down the road. Other options have to be developed. Are autonomous vehicles going to really solve the problem? Probably not. Plus, they're not going to really be here fully autonomous until a while. was talking with them. We're doing a lot on autonomous vehicles, and it doesn't sound like they're going to be here all that soon. So AARP has done a lot of transportation-focused livable communities work. We've done a lot on complete streets. We formed the Complete Streets Coalition and passed the statewide Complete Streets bill, along with the Michigan Environmental Council and Michigan League of Bicyclists, and a whole lot of other partners who signed on. We've done a lot of walkability audits. We have the Age-Friendly Network, front network of age-friendly communities. We have a livability index. I don't know if anybody knows about that, but this is a picture of Kalamazoo County. You get it creates a score based on housing and the neighborhood and transportation and all the different things that meet up with that, the 8 domains. We have livable community newsletters. We have a new livable community blog. We have all kinds of research on transportation, but done by our Public Policy Institute. Thank you.
Any questions?